All right, so I found my alternate flying spot for the day. As usual, all the original plans I had, right down to the time I was gonna fly, the spot I was gonna fly, and all that kind of went out the window. But it went out the window for a really good reason. So I basically passed by Mr. PachRay's house and picked up some new goodies. And I did want to talk a little bit about that whole thing. So we've been working on these little guys for a good few months now, right? And to me, it's a really interesting exercise in design and how you go about designing things. So by trade, I am what you call a product designer. And what that typically means is that I design digital stuff. So I do websites and apps, basically. But more importantly than that, I design websites and apps that actually do stuff, right? So, food delivery websites, booking websites, like quite a lot of corporate kind of stuff, but they're generally tools. They are tools that do a certain thing. And I do UX and UI and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, when it comes to design, there is something called the design process. So generally what you do when you're designing something in my digital world is that you go through various stages. You go through like a research stage where you find out, what are you trying to do? So you set your goal. It's like, what do we want to do here? What are we trying to achieve? You study the target market or the user base, what do they like? What do they not like? And then you basically come up with some assumptions and ideas. So you go through what we call a divergence phase, where you generate a whole bunch of ideas. Then you do a convergence phase after that, where you sort of refine the good ideas, prioritize the good ones, and move the other ones to the back. You identify the best ideas, and then you basically work on those. And the best ideas are usually the ones that are going to help you meet that initial goal that you set. From there, you go into the actual UI design part. So we want to achieve this. This is what people like and don't like. And these are the ideas we're focusing on. So how does that look and feel in a digital interface, right? What does the experience look like? So you go about designing that. And typically, you won't get it right the first time. You'll start off with maybe a couple different design approaches. You will then come back, test them, see which one works the best, and then you finally come up with the one that you're going to ship. And then you ship that out, meaning the developers get on it, they build it, you ship it out, goes into the public domain, and people start actually using that. But it never ends. So the trick with the product design process is that, let's just get this done first. The real trick with the product design process, though, is that it never ends. So yeah, you go out and you ship that product, right? Or that user interface enhancement or whatever it is. But it doesn't end there, because, people in the real world start using it, and you start, you see the results. You look at your data, you look at user feedback and things like that. Whole bunch of tools available for that stuff, and based on what you see, you can figure out, like, okay, are we meeting that original goal that we set or not? Should we go back and improve this thing we have built, or is it working fine? And so basically what you do is you launch it, and then you go back to the beginning and you try and make it better and better and better, until eventually, over numerous revisions, what your experience is gradually trends closer and closer towards what people ideally want. So your data starts going up, your users are happy, people are accomplishing their goals, whatever it is, right? Whatever metrics you're using to measure success. That's a really clumsy description of how digital product design works, but the design process itself is not restricted to websites and apps. The design process and that mindset can be applied to anything in the physical world or the digital world, including mini quads. And so I just wanted to quickly talk about this little guy and how that process, like I randomly ended up involved in this project just because I fly a lot of quads, and the guy who designs this lives here, and he said, hey, do you want to like test this quad that I'm building and stuff? And we just went from there. And we never planned to follow a certain design process or evolve the product, in a certain structured way. We kind of fell into that over time. And so what we would do is he would come out with like the quad, and I would fly it, give feedback, and at one point we were maybe working on the tune in beta flight and revising that and figuring out different settings for the the ESCs and the different beta flight settings to get the quad work right. Then we switched over to Emuflight, and we were always going out flying. I'd give my feedback, he would do a change, did the change work or not. We would go back and keep improving the tune. But the other thing that we have been tweaking a lot is the actual frame itself. The actual quad has not changed a lot in general. Like, it looks the same as it's looked for the past 3 months, but there has been just a ton of progress in terms of the little details on this quad. And I'm not trying to do a full review here because the quad's not done yet, but it's fascinating to see how much it has evolved over the last few months, just in terms of tiny changes and how they affect how good this thing is overall. So I could go on at length about all the little changes that have happened to this guy, but there's been a ton of them. Most notably would be, like little things have changed, right? So the carbon's been designed ever so slightly to make the arms just a little bit stronger. I think he's done some work on the bottom of the quad, so like the screws are now flush mounted. There's a proper, this is still foam, but there's a proper silicone pad on there that's going to hold the lipos just that little bit better. Little tiny things like that, but they add up and they make a difference. The canopy itself has been through some changes. So on the newer versions, the Crossfire antennas are now moved to the front, so you can rock a full Immortal T, because we're testing that out. So there was all these little clever things here all along, but you're probably maybe wondering about this guy. So even the naked GoPro has been a really big deal. I've always been hammering away about how the naked GoPro 8 is going to be insane for mini quads. And the reason for that is because it's got amazing quality, but also it's got stabilization in it. So what that does is it gets rid of a lot of the prop wash and random vibrations and stuff, and it means that using a little tiny quad, you can get really good video out of it, like really good, smooth, juicy video. But the first version of the naked hero we made was really lightweight and really thin. It was made out of like TPU, and it worked fine. I crashed it a bunch of times and it still worked, but Pavel's gone back and he's redone it in nylon, and so this is the new one, and it's so freaking strong now that I don't know if we're going to be able to break it or not. I don't think we'll break the case. We might break the electronics inside. And then after doing this thing in nylon, we realized that, okay, when you do a hard crash in a bando, the PETG canopy, it can shatter under really extreme crashes. So then he's gone and done a nylon canopy to match the nylon GoPro case. I keep saying we, but it's mostly him. It's like we in the sense that I'm the guy who breaks everything, and then he's the guy who has to fix everything. But look, this naked 8 has been redesigned. So the original case was TPU. It was that green and red thing, and it was fine. It worked. I crashed it a bunch of times, and I didn't actually break the naked GoPro. It worked fine, but yeah, it wasn't the strongest case. So he went back and he redesigned the whole case from scratch, and he's printed it in nylon, and this thing is just so incredibly strong now that I don't know if I'm going to be able to break it. In fact, he did a crash in the bando yesterday with running this case, and nothing happened to the GoPro, but his quad exploded, which then made us think like, okay, well, if that's nylon, what about this guy? So then he's gone and done a prototype canopy for the quad and nylon, and it's like so goddamn strong, but it's got just a little bit of flexibility to it as well. So it's going to be really interesting to try this out and see if it breaks. 90% of the time I'd never break anything on this quad because the quad's lightweight and generally it's not crashing that hard where it's going to explode. But see, you only find out certain things when you go out in the real world and you test it. So when we started coming out to the bando and really shredding with this thing, we found that, okay, there's some weak points, and there's always going to be some weak points, but some of those weak points we can address by making the GoPro case a bit tougher, or making the, you know, the canopy a little bit more resilient, and so on and so forth. And that's really been the story of this thing. Even the GoPro mounting method, we're using zip ties to hold this thing on, but the whole idea of that is that when you crash, the GoPro's meant to like detach and break the zip tie before transferring all that force to the quad. And then in order for that to work, there's a little plug that comes out of here. So the GoPro is meant to just fly off in an extreme crash and not break, and then the quad is meant to tumble elsewhere. And so you're kind of dividing the kinetic energy into two pieces instead of keeping everything together and having a really big high impact crash that shocks all the electronics. And that, hey, it's worked out so far. I don't know anyone else who's mounting GoPros using zip ties, but it works really well. It holds this thing on super firm. It's just designed in a certain way that it really works. So you just slide a zip tie through it and back, done. And this sucker is not going anywhere. And yet with this TPU mount, it's got a little bit of flexibility to absorb crashes on it. It's just little things like that that you notice with practice and experience. You gradually refine that product. We're also moving to like a slightly bigger connector on the back. So previously we've been powering the camera off like a typical FPV Cam connector, but just to make it a little more crash resilient, we're going to be moving to these bigger, thicker connectors, which I think are the same ones you use on some of the 1S lipos and stuff. It's a billion little things like that over a billion flights that, when you add it all up, results in a quad that is now, it's not only does it fly really well, but it's becoming super tough. Like, I don't know of any other quad that's carrying a naked GoPro on it that is actually tough on the same level as a typical 5-inch freestyle quad, where it's designed to do extreme freestyle in bandos and what have you. I just don't know of any other naked GoPro quads that can do it, but I'm thinking that this guy's getting there, man. It's like, not only do you have all the goodness of being able to cine whip with it and all that good stuff, but it can handle some pretty nasty hardcore freestyle moves as well. It's got the performance like in spades, and carries the naked GoPro. And there's just so much cool stuff about this quad. It's also like, because of the way the motors are, we've also done stuff like, another thing we've been testing is batteries, right? So you get this quad and we've tested it with little sort of 450 milliamp batteries and these 700 milliamp batteries, and 850, 950, whatever batteries, all 4S. The quad takes all of them, no problem. But what it does is it gives you so much flexibility in terms of like what kind of batteries you can fly, that you can kind of choose. Do I want to run the quad in a lighter configuration and sacrifice some flight time? Do I want to put a bigger battery on it and extend my flight time a bit? Do I want to go medium in the middle and get the best of both worlds? We've managed to play around with that. The quad handles all of these batteries no problem whatsoever. And it's crazy because like these little guys weigh about 56 grams or something, and the bigger batteries weigh almost double that. So overall though, like this quad flies with a GoPro on it in a trim anywhere from like around 200 grams all up to like 250 grams, maybe just a hair over that. We've also been playing with 3-inch props versus 3.5-inch props. We've even gone to the level of doing 3.5-inch props by cutting down 4-inch props. And I can tell you that like with 3.5-inch props on this sucker, it is a powerhouse, man. It leaps buildings with like zero effort. It's batshit crazy. And we're not done refining this thing yet. The reason this thing works is just because the motors are really well chosen. So they're like well within their efficiency range. They've got good torque, good response. And that lets you play around with the payload a bit. The tune is also stable enough. Like, it's really highly refined, but it's flexible enough that the quad doesn't care what battery you're putting on it. And I don't know of many other quads where you can, like, I think the quad itself weighs something like 100 and something grams, and then you're adding all that battery weight. So you're going anywhere from like almost doubling the weight of the quad to like, there's just so much stuff. So many things, and we're not even done testing yet. The whole point I'm trying to make here is that developing a really good quad, I know. The whole point I'm trying to make is that building a really good quad, if you take it seriously, involves a lot of trial and error and continuous small refinements. It is not something that you just slap together and it's perfect from day one and you just call it a day. And I think a lot of guys are missing that. And a lot of guys just are not patient enough to go through that process. It's like the same thing applies to, like, whether you're just setting up your own quad and tuning it and choosing parts for it and stuff, or whether you're designing a brand new quad from scratch and you're designing the frame and the everything and choosing parts and all that. I think that what separates a good quad from a really great quad is that design process, right? You build stuff, you test it, and then, hey, if it can be improved, you go back, you improve it, you test it again, and over and over and over. The guy, I've got to give credit to the guy who designed this, because he is like super detail oriented. So he likes to take his time, he likes to perfect things down to the nth degree. He's got some crazy 3D design / 3D printing skills, and he 3D prints all the stuff himself. And he'll sweat it out, like, not only in terms of the design, but also just the printing methods and the materials and everything. And the fact that, like, he's been willing to do all that work and then hand the quad over to a mutant like me who breaks everything, and then he has to go back to the drawing board and do everything all over again several times over a space of many months. I find that's pretty incredible, and that is why, come on bro, that takes some patience, man. It takes more than patience, it takes some hardcore dedication, and that's why I have a lot of respect for the guy. I think this plug is a bit wonky here. It's not everyone who's willing to do that, even on their tune, let alone building a whole quad from scratch. So, like, massive props to him. I don't know many people who are going to do that, put that same amount of effort into getting a quad as good as it can be. And that's why I, have been working so close with him, because I believe in his mission and I'm happy to participate in something like that, because I've just seen so much progress in this quad over the months and all the effort that's gone into it. And it's stuff that most people are not even going to notice, but it's just gone in leaps and bounds. And this quad is truly something, it's truly something great already, and it's just going to get even more incredible. And yes, it takes time and patience and all that, but people who have that mindset, that is the difference between doing something that's good and doing something that is truly great. So not all quads are created equal, and I will always be willing to invest my time in people who are really trying to innovate and really trying to put in the work to build stuff, refine it, test it again and again and again and again and again. Without further ado, I want to fly this thing. So I need to pair it to my phone now, check the GoPro settings and all that. So I'm going to bounce, but yeah, that's just a little quick catch up. When this thing is done, we'll do a little review on it, but stay tuned for that. Well, I'm sorry that flying was a little bit sloppy and crazy, but my hands are just shaking. The camera's shaking too, even though it has stabilization. My fingers are shaking. The quad is a little bit too fast for this spot. But yeah, if you know of any other 3-inch naked GoPro carrying micro quads that can do what this thing just did, let me know, because yeah, there is not many of them. In fact, I think this might be the only one. I wasn't trying to break it, I was just trying to fly, but the quad's a little quicker than I'd like, so it picks up a bit of speed, and this is a really tight spot. And some of the, like, I don't even have lines planned or anything like that. It's a bit sketchy and crazy, and my fingers are a bit wobbly too. So I'm gonna try and improve that. And yeah, let's keep flying, whatever, and more packs, etc. The quad is still not broken. Nothing happened to it. The props aren't even bent. I don't know. I'm gonna tweak the GoPro settings a bit and see if I can handle this quickly fading light situation. But yeah, it's a weapon.